Today I'm going to take these batteries and put them in this Jeep. I've got to move some things around first. But first, we're going to do mail time. HTS Huntersky reached out to me. They're a brand that does mostly shooting glasses, but they also do safety glasses for doing the sort of things that we do. They're ANSI Z87.1 compliant, which means they're safety glasses and anti-fog. I don't know that there's a whole lot to really say about safety glasses. Yeah, they look pretty good. These little side panels are removable as well. I don't find them particularly obtrusive, so I'll probably keep them on, but it's cool because it gives them a little bit different look. The arms are rubberized and really flexy, so they're pretty comfortable for wearing for a long time. Thanks to HTS Huntersky for sponsoring this video and helping me look good and see good. You only get two eyes. Take care of them. I'm going to start by cutting out a bunch of stuff that I've put a lot of effort into previously. I know from mocking this up in the previous video that the power steering motor sticks too far over and is probably too far forward too. When I put this in, I didn't want it to be too far back because the phase wires for the motor were going to be here, but they weren't there then. Now that they are there, I can see that I can move that back a good bit. I also want to be able to pull this motor off. There's a little spider coupler sort of thing in there that can strip out. And to do that, you need to pull the motor off. And I don't really want to have to pull the battery box off to do that. Moving this thing up is also going to improve the geometry on the steering shaft. If I'm lucky, I can get rid of this double U-joint and the support bearing. I need to pull this cross member so I can wiggle this thing around into the right position. I think if I jam this all the way back up in there, I'll need to trim out here a bit. But I think it's clearing the plane of this, which is going to sort of be the back of the battery box. But let's sort that out next before we go further on this. What I want to do here is cut all of this stuff off and then drill through and mount it with bolts going that way. But the way I made this originally, there's not really enough room to drill in there, so I'll need to remake that. A large part of this process is just spending a long time staring at things. I need to have the bottom of the battery box high enough that at full suspension travel, the differential won't hit it. So it needs to be about the level of this 2x3. And so if the battery box needs to be higher up, and the motor mount's higher up, and the power steering unit's higher up, might as well just make that cross member higher up. I 3D printed a test cross member and immediately set about modifying it because it wasn't quite right. I 3D printed a motor mount plate and a cross member, which might seem like kind of a silly thing to do, but I'm in a situation here where in order to figure out where anything goes, I need to figure out where everything goes. I'm going to cut these out on the plasma cutter, so I need to draw them up anyway. So it seems like it's worth the extra work to do some sort of low-effort mock-ups. Pretty happy with this setup. I'm not totally sold on the single U-joint on the steering shaft, but I'm going to go with that for now, and I think I'm ready to commit to metal. The plasma cutter had a little issue on the first try at cutting out the cross member, but the second one came out well. don't have a press brake and I don't know how well the mag brake's going to handle this material. So I cut 1-inch long slots, left half an inch. Hopefully that works. It's kind of guesswork at this point because I've never done it this way. I was pushing it, but it did it. You know, I think the only thing that didn't really get reflected with the 3D printed one is my mediocre TIG welding. But it was good practice, and that's what grinders are for. Welded some tubes in here, then fired up the old P1S and 3D printed some urethane bushings. Even put a little slot in there for the seam in the tube. Now I have somewhere for my motor mount bolts. This plate sits really close to the motor, so these bolts can't really stick out at all. So they need a little bit of customization. There's a time for computer-aided design and fancy plasma cut parts, and there's a time for cardboard too. This is a time for cardboard. Kidding, right? Doesn't come off, huh? Oh, there we go. Just barely. I think that's basically back to where we were at the beginning of the video, but cleaner, simpler, and lighter, which is, you know, really important when you're going to throw 400 pounds of batteries in here. It's kind of funny to me to have to redo all that stuff, because building it by hand the first time was a big part of what inspired me to do the CNC plasma cutter, and it's certainly getting a workout on this project. Seems like it makes sense to drill and tap all these holes around the perimeter while this is still flat. I've only got 50 holes to tap in this one. So now really all I should have to do is the old... That's a lot easier than bending it by hand, but it doesn't really change the fact that I'm fighting for every little scrap of space in here. I think I can make this work. Moving on. I was smart enough to weld in some nuts for mounting this to the cross member. Just chase these real quick, make sure that the welding didn't mess up the threads at all. Then 3D printed some urethane spacers. Give it a little flex, but try to save as much room as I can. That needs to come this way. The hole's not in the right place? What? Just kidding. Of course, everything fits perfectly without having to weld it up again and re-drill. I think I can pick up this hole for a front mount on this side, assuming I can get my transfer punch in here. So naturally, it's right on the edge there. Alright, tack it, test it, weld it, move on. You know, now that I look at this from this angle, this is high enough that doing 10 gauge was probably way overkill, but I don't think it's going to break from being overbuilt. I think on this side I can come off of the plate for the steering box that I made. Well, a whole bunch more sparks later and we got that in there. Let me get you in here with the GoPro and see if you can actually see it a little better. I think that'll work. I did have to bend this back a little bit, but I stuck the socket down on the bolt while I bent it. Make sure I can get the socket in and out. Let's see if we can put a battery in here. This part of the process felt a lot like doing a puzzle, only you have to make all the puzzle pieces, and you don't necessarily know what it looks like. I 3D printed a bunch of spacers to hold the batteries in place. Picked up these used bus bars from a Tesla battery pack. They should be just about perfect for making my series connections there. I'll need some threaded bungs to actually attach the batteries to the battery box. And in much less time than it took me to make 6 of those, my 3D printer spit out a drill guide for me because I need to get these in fairly accurate locations. Put little fillets on it, so if there's a little bit of weld booger, it doesn't matter. That's a problem, though. I'm going to use some 3/8 button heads on these, just because it's probably the lowest profile option, lets me set the module down the farthest. But if I put that hole there, it's going to interfere with that. Probably could have just used these as my drill guide. As many times as I'm test fitting this, you might be wondering why I'm struggling to work around this inverter. I sure am. Didn't I just take this out? That hood's not gonna close, is it? Oh, it does? It's not actually touching, but it's really close. Echo. Echo. I hate it. This is just too much weight, too far up. Doesn't give me any room to add cooling plates if I decide to go back and do that later. So I think I'm going to revert back to my original plan, which is to put one module below this, running sideways. And then in addition to the 2 that I was going to put here, go back to putting 1 here. It's going to be a bit more work to get it in there, but that was sort of my original idea, which gets the front stack looking more like that. I don't know about you, but I like that way better. Of course, before I start moving around brake lines and modifying that and building a rear battery box, I should probably figure out if I can actually fit 3 modules under there. So it's time to bust out the foam board and hot glue and do some arts and crafts. I usually try to make these videos have some kind of a theme. I don't know if it always comes through, but the theme of this one is definitely there are a million different ways to figure this stuff out. Sometimes the best way is to build something and see if you like it. Sometimes it's to play with craft supplies. Kind of the thing about this is a project that I originally said was probably going to take me about 4 years. I think I'm probably about on that schedule. So it's one of those things where if it takes me a couple extra days or even a month to go back and change something and redo something to make it the way I really want it to be, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. I like that. Still some challenges to overcome, but I think we'll get there. Got those tacked up and the batteries fit in there. Now we need to make these fit in the Jeep. I didn't video a whole lot of doing the back box because it's a lot of stuff under the Jeep, but it's tied into the body mounts front and rear and it feels pretty good. I'm happy with that. The front one, I can pick up these existing holes in the frame. The problem here is once I drop the box in, because this is a C-channel, there's no way for me to get a nut on the back of that. So I threaded some inserts, turned them down to 9/16, put a little knurl on them. I reamed these holes to 9/16. I've got my special installation tool here. Now all I have to do is weld up that hole and drill it again in the right place. And maybe drill that one out a little bit. I went ahead and welded these inserts in because it occurred to me it would be a real pain if they ever came loose in there when there was a bolt in them. Don't ask why it occurred to me. Now, let's see if this is going to work. Sweet. I like that. Now I gotta pull them out and weld them up. Oh, and I cut my hair. You can probably tell. You probably noticed I've been jumping back and forth between TIG welding and MIG welding. That's because sometimes I feel like TIG welding and sometimes I feel like MIG welding. TIG welding is slower and requires more prep, but it's cleaner. MIG welding's dirtier and smokier, but it's faster, and I find I like it better if I'm filling up a little bit of a gap. I'm using 1/8" aluminum for the covers for these. I made some more 3D printed pieces as hold downs. I still want to do a little bit more tweaking on these, but for now I can throw the rear floor pan back on and make it look like nothing out of the ordinary. I've come to realize that doing dry runs in the plasma cutter is time well spent. I'm going to cut part of the bottom out of the front box. I should be able to reuse all of it. Well, that pretty much nailed right along my Sharpie line. Doing slots and tabs in this means I just need to cut the corresponding slots and tabs into the new side panels, and everything lines up nicely. For holding the batteries in place in this one, I cut some threads on some 1/2" rod. And then cut out a big plate of 1/4-inch aluminum. Well, let's see what happens if we try to put this all together. Apparently what happens is it doesn't go in with this steering shaft in place. Somehow all of these mounts more or less line up, which is kind of a minor miracle. I still need to make some spacers between these to hold that one down. And a quick cut to me tightening it up like that went in easily. Off camera I went ahead and did the first side of this because it's just more plasma cutting and bending and drilling like you've been seeing me do. I did put this fuse disconnect in here and put the fender in to make sure I can actually disconnect it. I did spend a while measuring and modeling all of this in CAD, but it kind of occurs to me that I can't build everything up to that same level because the inverter won't fit on top. I want to put my battery management system and all of my contactors and that sort of stuff in here, and I kind of need to figure out where all of that goes before I can build the rest of the battery box. And I've got to figure out how to run cables down to this bottom battery module too. So this side of the box is going to get pretty complicated. Normally I like to bring these videos to a full conclusion, have all of this wrapped up, but I think in this case I'm going to leave it off here because otherwise I'm going to end up making something that I'm going to have to cut out again, just like I did all through this video. So I'm going to leave off here and say thanks for watching.